If you've been scrolling through endless telescope options, weighing aperture size against portability, and still feel stuck wondering which one actually makes sense for your backyard nights, this review is here to clear that up. You've probably imagined hauling a 10-inch Dobsonian up a hill, then realizing the thing barely fits in your trunk, or you've heard the hype about collapsible designs and wonder if they're just a gimmick. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through the real-world experience of the Skywatcher Flextube 250 and see whether its promises line up with what you'll actually get when you point it at Jupiter. First off, the biggest question most beginners ask is, will this telescope give me the views I've seen in glossy ads without turning my garage into a storage room? The Flextube 250 tries to answer that with a 10-inch, 250mm, primary mirror that's hard to ignore. A mirror that size grabs a lot of light, so even under a modest suburban sky you'll start to see the banded clouds of Jupiter, the spiral arms of M51, and the dusty lanes of the Orion Nebula without needing a motorized mount. That's the kind of wow factor that turns a casual hobbyist into a regular stargazer. But the same mirror also means the tube isn't lightweight by accident. The clever part of this model is its collapsible design. The optical tube splits into two sections that slide together, reducing the overall length from about 4 feet down to roughly 2. In practice, the folding mechanism works smoothly thanks to the Teflon bearings the manufacturer mentions, and you can actually fit the collapsed package into a mid-size SUV. I've taken it from my driveway to a county park about 30 minutes away, and the whole setup from unloading the bag, extending the tube, to tightening the tension handles took me under 10 minutes. That's fast enough to keep a group of friends from getting bored while you're still getting the scope ready. Who should buy this? If you're a beginner who wants a telescope that can grow with you, the Flextube 250 is a solid bridge. It's big enough to keep you intrigued after you've exhausted the moon and the planets, yet its design keeps the logistical headache low. Families that need to store the scope after a night of viewing will appreciate that the tube collapses and the whole unit comes fully assembled. No need to buy a separate mount or worry about aligning mirrors. Also, anyone who lives in a suburban area with limited dark sky access will benefit from the larger aperture because it extracts more detail even when the sky isn't pristine. On the flip side, there are clear reasons to skip this one. If you live in an apartment building and have no place to set up a permanent Dobsonian base, you'll still need a sturdy surface each night. The base is a solid steel base with a simple alta-to-azimuth motion, but it isn't something you can set on a flimsy balcony rail without a dedicated table. Moreover, seasoned observers who already own an 8-inch Dobsonian or a motorized equatorial mount may find the added weight of a 10-inch mirror, roughly 30 pounds, with the base unnecessary for their typical deep sky sessions. Those users often prefer a lighter, more portable setup that they can carry up a mountain without a car. Now, let's talk about practical strengths. The first thing you'll notice when you look through the eyepiece is the contrast. The mirrors are coated to reflect about 94% of incoming light, which translates to darker background skies and brighter nebular structures. In a side-by-side test with a similar size but cheaper Dobsonian I owned, the Flextube showed crisper edges on Saturn's rings, especially when I used a low-power 25mm PLSSL. Another strength is the proprietary tension control handles. They let you fine-tune how tightly the two tube sections lock together, which helps keep the optics aligned after transport. I've collapsed and re-extended the telescope several times over a weekend camping trip, and there was no noticeable shift in the collimation, a common pain point for many collapsible designs. Weaknesses are just as important to flag. The biggest hidden trade-off is the base's weight distribution. Because the optical tube is taller when extended, the center of gravity sits a bit higher than on a traditional fixed-tube Dobsonian. On windy evenings, the scope can feel a little top-heavy, and you'll need to keep the base firmly anchored. I found that placing a small sandbag on the base's rear helped, but it's an extra step most first-time buyers don't think about. Another practical issue is the eyepiece rack. The included rack holds 3 standard 1.25-inch eyepieces, which is convenient, yet the spacing is a tad tight, making quick swaps a bit fiddly when you're trying to keep the night moving. A common question is how the telescope handles accessories. Because the tube collapses, you can't mount a heavy motorized focuser without some modification, but the standard 2-inch focuser works perfectly with most low-cost moon and planet eyepieces. If you plan to dive into deep sky astrophotography, you'll quickly discover that the Altaz mount isn't.